The United States has imposed substantial tariffs on Chinese goods, expecting that the economic pressure would force China to yield. However, rather than backing down, China has chosen to respond with a calculated and well-strategized counterattack. This conflict extends far beyond a simple trade dispute. It represents a struggle for global economic dominance. In response to the U.S. tariffs, China has announced its own set of tariffs on critical American exports, including coal, crude oil, farm equipment, and automobiles, with some reaching as high as 15%. However, the most significant move is not the tariffs themselves but China's decision to restrict the export of crucial minerals that the U.S. heavily depends on. These moves are not random acts of retaliation. They are part of a carefully devised strategy aimed at shifting the balance of global economic power. China's countermeasures send a clear message that it is willing to engage in economic warfare to protect its interests. These new tariffs are strategically crafted to target key sectors of the U.S. economy. By imposing a 15% tariff on American coal and liquefied natural gas, China is striking directly at the heart of the U.S. energy industry. Additionally, the 10% tariff on crude oil threatens to weaken America's global energy dominance. Tariffs on farm equipment and automobiles are particularly significant because they impact industries based in politically sensitive states, places where economic hardship can influence electoral outcomes. While at first glance, these tariffs may seem like a tit-for-tat response to U.S. actions, they signify something far more profound. Over the past decade, China has been steadily reducing its reliance on American imports, strengthening its domestic agricultural production, forging deeper energy partnerships with Russia and the Middle East, and diversifying its supply chains. These latest tariffs are not just about immediate retaliation, they are a step toward long-term economic self-sufficiency. If this were merely a warning shot, it would suggest that China is testing Washington's resolve. However, the reality is likely far more significant. If China continues to take steps that further minimize its reliance on the U.S., this trade war will no longer be a temporary clash of policies but a fundamental restructuring of global trade dynamics. Tariffs, though powerful, are only one tool in China's arsenal. Its real advantage lies in its dominance over rare and critical minerals, a resource that is far more difficult for the U.S. to counteract. While tariffs can create temporary economic strain, controlling the supply of essential raw materials can shift the entire global power structure. China is the world's leading supplier of rare earth elements, which are essential for manufacturing semiconductors, batteries, military weapons, and green energy technologies. By restricting the export of tungsten, thorium, ruthenium, and molybdenum, China is putting immense pressure on industries that the United States cannot afford to lose. Without access to these materials, American technology giants, defense contractors, and electric vehicle manufacturers could face serious disruptions. The U.S. government is well aware of this risk, which is why it has been aggressively seeking alternative sources of rare minerals by investing in mining projects in countries such as Australia and Canada. However, there is a major challenge. Establishing new supply chains for these critical materials takes years, if not decades. The U.S. simply does not have the luxury of time. This is not the first instance of China leveraging its control over rare earth minerals to exert pressure. In 2010, when Beijing restricted rare earth exports to Japan, the move sent shockwaves through the global technology industry. Japan was forced to restructure its supply chains to reduce dependence on China, a process that took years and required billions of dollars in investment. The United States is in an even more vulnerable position. If China were to cut off the supply of these critical minerals, the consequences for American industries could be catastrophic. However, Washington is unlikely to sit idly by while China exerts such influence. If Beijing is using trade policy as a means to consolidate its control over global supply chains, the U.S. will respond by targeting China's most fragile sectors. This could lead to an escalation of the ongoing technological conflict, beginning with an intensified scrutiny of one of the world's most powerful technology firms, Google. For years, the United States has taken aggressive measures against Chinese technology firms. Washington has effectively banned Huawei from its markets, imposed restrictions on TikTok, and sought to limit China's access to advanced semiconductor technology. In response, China is now launching an antitrust investigation into Google. While this may appear to be a regulatory measure, it is in reality a clear signal that Beijing is prepared to challenge American dominance in the tech sector using the same tactics that Washington has employed against Chinese firms. Although Google officially exited China in 2010 due to concerns over censorship, it still has a significant presence in the Chinese advertising market, generating billions of dollars in revenue. If Beijing intensifies its scrutiny, Google's operations in China may become unsustainable, potentially forcing the company to withdraw entirely. More importantly, China's actions against Google set a dangerous precedent. If it is willing to target one of America's most powerful technology companies, it could soon expand its scrutiny to include Apple, Microsoft, and Intel, companies that depend heavily on Chinese manufacturing and consumers. Apple, in particular, is at significant risk. Nearly all of the company's iPhones are assembled in China, meaning that any disruption to Apple's Chinese operations could wreak havoc on its global supply chain almost overnight. Such a move would deal a serious blow to the US tech industry. Historically, China has refrained from imposing tariffs on the US, opting instead for more strategic economic maneuvers. So what has changed? China's decision to impose tariffs at this moment is not simply a reaction, it is a message. Beijing is making it clear that it will not passively absorb economic attacks from Washington without responding. The question now is how far China is willing to go. If the United States continues imposing tariffs, will China continue escalating its countermeasures, or does it have a threshold beyond which it will not retaliate? China has a long-standing preference for calculated and measured responses rather than reckless escalation. Unlike the United States, which often reacts with abrupt and aggressive economic policies, China tends to play the long game. It does not retaliate in ways that could inflict significant damage upon itself. However, if Washington continues its economic hostilities, China will almost certainly keep responding, but in ways that maximize its leverage while minimizing its own risks. Tariffs are just one tool at China's disposal. Beijing has already shown that it can target critical US industries such as energy, agriculture, and technology. If necessary, it could take even more drastic steps beyond tariffs, such as further restricting the export of rare earth minerals, cutting investments in American businesses, or tightening regulations on US companies operating within China. China's position in this trade war has been significantly strengthened by its reduced dependence on the United States. The more Washington attempts to pressure China, the more Beijing accelerates its efforts toward economic self-sufficiency. This means that future US sanctions and tariffs may have diminishing effects, while China's retaliatory measures could become even more damaging to the American economy. If the United States continues down this path, it risks not only losing the trade war but also its long-standing grip on the global economy. Many experts believe that the world has already entered a new Cold War, albeit one fought with economic weapons rather than military force. The United States is not just imposing tariffs, it is severing China's access to Western financial systems, restricting its ability to obtain advanced technologies, and increasing military pressure in the Asia-Pacific region. In response, China is forging new alliances, expanding the BRICS coalition, and leading an economic movement that seeks to diminish reliance on the Western financial order. The world is dividing into two competing economic blocs, on one side, the United States and its Western allies, and on the other, China, Russia, and a rising coalition of nations eager to challenge US dominance. At this point, the question is no longer whether the trade war will persist, it is whether the global economy is entering an irreversible state of division. According to leading Chinese economist Louise L. of Oxford Economics, Beijing's latest round of tariffs has effectively increased the tariff rate on US imports into China by nearly 2 percentage points. While this may seem like a minor adjustment, it signals a serious escalation in tensions. Louise warns that this conflict is still in its early stages and that we may only be witnessing the beginning of a prolonged economic battle. If her prediction is accurate, this is not a single episode of retaliation but the first step in a sustained tariff war. If this cycle of escalation continues, it will not only disrupt trade between the two superpowers but also reshape global supply chains, weaken multinational corporations, and force businesses worldwide to reconsider their trade strategies. The central question is not whether more tariffs will follow, they almost certainly will, but how aggressive each side will become. If both Washington and Beijing continue to escalate, this could spiral into a full-blown economic Cold War with far-reaching consequences.